Part 2. Whatever's waiting on the other side. Chapter 1. Memories live longer than dreams. The sky had changed from its pleasant blue to the deep navy of the night. Stars, more stars than Jedediah had ever seen, twinkled in the inky sky. He could do nothing but stare at them, trying to find constellations he recognized. Flat on his back, arms spread out, blades of grass surrounding his entire being, his gaze enraptured by the sky above. His eyes were so focused on the stars, he didn't notice Octavius's gaze locked onto him. The two men stayed like this for a while, atop a hill, the night sky above them. I thought the planetarium had good stars, but this? Jedediah turned his head towards Octavius, his eyes still locked on the sky. This is something else. You really are. Jedediah's eyes finally turned away from the stars to meet Octavius's gaze. What? Octavius covered his mouth, almost unwillingly. His face flushed with embarrassment as his gaze was suddenly transfixed on the ground. Nothing, Octavius said, muffled. Jedediah snorted before laughing as he sat up. A few stray blades of grass stuck to his clothes. You know, you ain't subtle. He looked back to the sky again, looking for red stars. All that stuff you're on about in England, it wasn't hard to connect the dots. The stars began to fall as a meteor shower began. You asked me to hold your hand, after all. And when we were hiding in Attila's hat, Jedediah brought his knees to his chest. You held me. Octavius tried to look at Jedediah, but couldn't bring himself to do so. Jedediah took his focus off the stars for a moment, putting his head down onto his knees. His toes curled in the grass, bunching up the terrain beneath his feet. I ain't never been held like that. Jedediah's face had felt hot as he admitted that. I guess Jedediah couldn't bring himself to speak again. His words stumbled out of his mouth as he tried to put them in the right order. Octavius came closer, hesitantly putting his arms around his midnight cowboy. Jedediah lifted his head. Their eyes finally met again. I can see the stars so clearly. Octavius put a hand on Jedediah's cheek as he watched the meteor shower reflected in his eyes. So what you said in Pompeii, you meant it, right? Octavius nodded. Every word. Jedediah leaned closer to him and gently, ever so gently, pressed his lips against Octavius's. The two men stayed like that for a moment, their lips together, eyes closed, bodies in embrace. Jedediah was the first to pull away. I love you too. Midnight, the stars, and you. The sun rose in Jedediah's paradise. Golden beams of light broke over the horizon, through the mountains. The sky's color changed as the stars faded away, the deepest night blue fading away, brightening into shades of pink and gold. The two men laid in the grass, in one another's arms. Jedediah's head rested on Octavius's chest, his ear pressed where his heart would be. There was no gentle thump-thump of his heart. Would there have been at all if they were alive anyway? Or whatever imitation of alive they embodied? Well, it didn't matter now. Their lives were over. Jedediah? Yeah? I'm glad you're happy here. Jedediah looked up towards his lover. The clear skies, the open lands, the unexplored terrain. It seems to be everything you want. Jedediah put his hand on Octavius's chest. Not everything. The two men met their gazes again. I don't want to explore this place alone. There's a whole world in here waiting to be cataloged, to be studied, to be mapped out. But Jedediah rose up to fully rest atop Octavius, sitting on him at the waist. I don't want to explore it without you. He leaned down towards Octavius, his hands resting on either side of his head, palms in the grass. Gently, he leaned closer, and their lips met. For a moment, time seemed to stop. Nothing else mattered. Not the rising sun, not the flowing river, not the blowing winds. Just this kiss, shared between two men that never would have met if not for the magic of Khonsu. The sun finally rose above the mountains. I finally got to experience the sunrise with you. Octavius stroked Jedediah's scruffy cheek. He could never fully commit to the beard. The scratchy hair reminded him of the thorns of his key. We haven't visited my paradise yet, have we? Jedediah shook his head. Let's go take a look. Octavius patted his side, looking for a pocket that he must have placed it in. No pockets. He didn't lose his chance for paradise, did he? Aki? Jedediah pointed out the white rose, floating above Octavius's head. Slowly, it descended into his hand, its shape morphing into a key not unlike Jedediah's. Well, all we need now is the door. Octavius moved to get up, but found his hand pressing not against grass and earth, but wood. They were laying atop the door. Jedediah got up from Octavius's waist. Well, if that's where it manifested, then, Octavius said with a shrug. He plunged his key into the door, and it fell open, taking him with it. Octavius! Jedediah grasped the sides of the doorway as Octavius fell in. He expected to see him falling into something dangerous, like cobblestone roads or shining marble or lava. Not a king-sized bed. Octavius had landed in a bedroom, with floors of stone and furniture of wood, a nightstand on either side of the bed, a purple curtain draped around the sides. Jedediah realized that the door opened through the bed's canopy. Octavius landed on his back, the bed cushioning his fall. His dark curls bounced as he laughed, his chest rising and falling with each breath. He looked up at his cowboy, his sunny wilderness casting a beam of morning light down into the bedroom. Lovers staring through a skylight. Come on, Jedediah, the Roman laughed, his arms extended upwards to catch the cowboy. Jedediah smiled and leapt in right after him, landing atop his new love. Octavius caught him with both arms and at least one leg. The bedsheets came undone at his landing, concave for a moment as the two men laughed in their embrace. Octavius took the lead this time, carefully cupping Jedediah's scruffy cheeks for a kiss. Grata domum, Jedediah. What's that mean, Aki? Welcome home. And their lips met again. Chapter 2. Not even nostalgia is as good as it used to be. The morning sun glittered through the windows of the bedroom. Specks of dust floated in the light, descending down ever so slowly, like marine snow. One of the beams of light came to rest on the purple curtains on the bed, which kept the two men occupying it hidden from the rest of existence. Octavius and Jedediah laid on their sides, one still covered in dirt and grass stains. So your paradise is a house? Well, yes. Soldiers were promised a few acres of land, if they served for 25 years. I always felt that was a better option than what Augustus had. What did he have? Augustus was the emperor. He had everything. Multiple rooms for servants, elaborate mosaics, a large seating area, direct access to the Temple of Apollo. Anything he needed, it was within arm's reach, or only an order away. Jeez. And you want to give all that up for a homestead? I don't need a palace, Jedediah. That much excess, it sickens me. Jedediah placed his leg over Octavius's hip. Well, he's long gone now, Aki. And like you said, that was Augustus. That ain't you. Octavius blushed a bit at Jedediah's leg pinning him down. Pulvis et umbra sumus. Octavius's brow rose. We are dust and shadows. Jedediah, you... What? A man can't read a book sometimes, Jed snorted. Look on your face. Jedediah kissed him on the forehead. I got a soft spot for old literature, Aki. Homer, Horace, Chaucer, Dante, anything made before the printing press. Octavius smiled as a blush came to his cheeks. Guess that's why I drifted to you. Jed removed his leg from Octavius's hip and rose to sit up. How's about we take a look around? Octavius nodded, rising to his feet on the same side as Jedediah. The stone floors felt cool against his bare feet. Jedediah shivered as he stood up. Eesh, chilly. Octavius felt the light bulb go off in his head. In a swift motion, Jedediah was lifted off his feet, Octavius picking him up into a bridal carry. Jedediah's face matched the shade of a cherry tomato. Octavius chuckled at his stammering cowboy. Finally out of words, Jedediah? Jed tried to pull down his hat, but without a brim to capture, he ended up burying his face in his hands. The domus was a simple home, 4 rooms in total. The bedroom, of course, a kitchen with a stone oven and stocked pantry, a private bath whose water was the ideal temperature, and a main area with a fire pit, skylight, and seating area. All the furniture matched the bed, the same shade of deep purple in the velvet and cotton threads. Jedediah whistled in appreciation as he rummaged through the pantry. "Pretty sweet, Aki. It's got everything you need." He pulled out one of the jars of pickles and popped the lid. "It has been too damn long since I had one of these," he said with a smile as he fished one of the larger pickles from the jar. "I never was a fan of pickles, I think," Octavia said, testing the softness of the couch. "Were pickles even invented when Augustus was around?" Jed asked as he took a bite. Octavius was about to answer, but was interrupted by a knocking at the door. "Oi, anyone home?" The two recognized that particular brash voice. Under the door, like a shadow, slid Psychopomp. "Oh, hey, sir," Jedediah said with his mouth full of pickle. Psychopomp rose a brow. Jedediah saw the Reaper put a hand on its waist. "Sigh, huh?" Jedediah swallowed. "You need a nickname. Psychopomp is real long." Psychopomp shrugged and made their way over to the seating area. "Hello, Lord Mercury. To what do I owe the honor?" Octavius asked. "Ain't you the polite one? Just stopping by to see how you two are getting along." They conjured a bottle of beer from Golden Light and took a swig. "Everything to your liking? It's your paradise, so it should adjust to your wants." Octavius took a look around. "Yes, I'd say it's about what I'd want. The specifics I'd never got the time to think about." Jedediah sat next to Octavius, still working on that pickle. "That's great. It's going to take ages for me to explore all of it." Psychopomp nodded with a smile as he took another sip. "Excellent. Now, as I said earlier, you two are a strange case. You got to go straight to your paradise, without going through the motions that everyone else does. Your spiritual ties are so tangled up that Indra's taking notes for his net." "I'm afraid I don't understand," Octavius stated as he leaned forward to rest his elbows on his knees. Psychopomp chugged the rest of the bottle before it disappeared into mist. "You ain't been judged yet." A chill ran through the men's spines. "Now the folks next door are negotiating on who gets to judge you, but that'll take a while, so..." Both men saw a sad look in Psychopomp's eye. "Try not to get too attached to this place." Jedediah angrily crunched the last bite of his pickle and swallowed. "How dare you?" Octavius looked at his lover. That rage he knew Jed was capable of was burning in his eyes. "Come again?" "How dare you give us paradise, then threaten to rip it from us? How cruel can the gods be?" Octavius put a hand on Jedediah's shoulder to try and calm him. Psychopomp conjured another cigar. "I ain't say that. I just said don't get attached." The smoke coming off the cigar's end began to morph and change into new shapes. The men watched as they spoke. "You two got different gods. Orc, you're meant to be judged when you pay yours truly to take you across the Styx. Jed, you're meant to be judged by the Christian god. Thing is, both divinities have records of you two already passing through." The smoke danced into visuals of what Psychopomp was saying. "It's like double jeopardy. You can't judge the same soul twice." The smoke changed forms into a pyramid. Then Quansu came by, claiming that you were his. That really got the group up in arms, and all the Pantheon waltzing in like they owned the place. As the smoke began to dissipate, Psychopomp's cigar disappeared. "So now, rather than making progress, the groups are fighting and bitching amongst one another." The two men turned their gaze back to Psychopomp as the smoke vanished. "That's why I said don't get attached. These paradises are generic. If Quansu gets his way, your afterlives are going to change." Octavius raised a hand. "How so?" And just at that moment, when someone at my side says, "There, he's gone," there are other eyes that are watching for him coming, and other voices ready to take up the glad shout, "There he comes!" And that is dying. 3 years in stasis. That's what Attila woke up to. 3 years since his last goodbye. Carefully, he moved his fingers, his hands dusty and stiff. "I'm alive," he muttered to himself in his own language. Carefully, he stepped from his podium. Was this real? It had to be a dream. "Attila, my old comrade!" Akhmenra approached the Hun, his eyes watering and arms outstretched. Attila couldn't help but cry as the god king embraced him. "Aki!" He hugged the pharaoh back, lifting him from his feet into the air. "Good to see you again, Attila." Nicholas Daly was behind Akhmenra, dressed in the iconic jacket of the Night Guard. "Nikki." Attila held out an arm. Nick approached to hug the Hun back, only to be lifted up just like Akhmenra. "Geez, he's strong. You'll get used to it, guardian of Ibiza." Attila placed the two back on the ground when he'd had his fill of hugs. How? Nick pointed out the sign above the entrance. In a big banner that extended over the windows, a statement read, Grand Reopening of the Tomb of Akhmun-Ra. Nick smiled as he faced Attila again. Looks like our friends over in Britain set up an exchange. They get our taxidermy and the Neanderthals, and we get Akh back. He held his arms around the God King's shoulders, shaking him a little. Akhmun-Ra laughed as he was gently shaken. And I bring experience. My mother and father have been teaching me more about the tablet than I thought possible. I can do far more with it now. You could see our nightly gifts as my beginning stages. Attila's smile disappeared as they thought about what Nick had said. Dixie? Nick, instinctively, felt for his keys. They were still there. He's around here somewhere. He was getting a bit out of shape, so he's been in restoration for a month or so. I assume if he's awake, he's still in there. His vision was blocked by a certain capuchin using his head as a springboard. Dexter landed atop Attila's hat. His elbows and knees were covered in bandages, and some patches of his fur were worn down, but he was the same mischievous monkey they all loved. Attila gave him a gentle scritching under his chin. Nicholas, my boy! Teddy approached on his horse, Sacagawea riding alongside him. Good to see you, lad! He extended a hand out to the new guard. Nick shook it. Ooh, good handshake. Where's Lawrence, might I ask? Teddy held Sacagawea's hand as she descended from the horse. Yeah, he took the fall for McPhee, so he's not here anymore, Ted. Sorry. Teddy nodded. He's well, then? Nick gave a hug to Sacagawea. He is, actually. He's a teacher now. Akhmun-Ra clapped his hands together. So, we've got everyone here except the miniatures. I assume they're as shocked as the rest of you to be awake. The group collectively felt their stomachs drop. Akh, you remember what happened to them, right? Nick asked the pharaoh. Akhmun-Ra smiled and held up a hand. Yes, I remember. Fell into the vents. But Dexter was a clever little simian getting them out before they roasted. Dexter let out a sad chitter as he sunk behind Attila's head. Nick's skin crawled. He either didn't remember or was completely in denial. Come along, then. We mustn't waste time. The night is only so long. Akhmun-Ra made his way to the Hall of Miniatures, his shoes clicking in the halls. He's not going to like this. Nick followed after him, feeling his pocket for movement. The remains of Jedediah and Octavius rested in his pocket. Neither he nor Larry could bring themselves to throw it out. That eye in the center. It never moved, it never changed, it never did anything. But both guards felt that somehow it was looking at them, judging them, asking without words for 3 long years, why didn't you save us? Nick knew tonight was going to be the hardest of all the nights to follow. Chapter 3. And nothing comes between the sadness and the scream. The diorama hall was still, silent. Not one group came alive. The Romans weren't practicing their drills. The railroad wasn't being worked on in Western expansion. The Mayans weren't building their pyramid. No one moved. The atmosphere was thick with dread. Nick felt a twinge in his heart. Why aren't they awake yet? Akhmun-Ra asked Nick as they entered. I don't know. Nick's words dropped as he spoke. What happened to them? Very funny, Jedediah. Akhmun-Ra shook his head, resting his hands on his knees to peer into the Western expansion diorama. I'm honestly more surprised that you and Octavius got everyone to cooperate. Now, where are you, Jedediah? We simply must converse. You were telling me of this lovely thing called a rodeo, and you didn't explain the purpose of the clowns. Akhmun-Ra reached into the exhibit, attempting to look inside the buildings. Nick gently grabbed Akhmun-Ra's wrist. Akh, that's enough. The pharaoh snatched his wrist back from the guard. Octavius, your negotiation skills must have helped you in convincing the Mayans to remain still despite the language barrier. Well done. Now come on, you simply must tell me more about your pantheon. Akhmun-Ra tried to reach inside the Colosseum, but was stopped again by Nick. Akh. Akhmun-Ra stood to his feet again and met Nick's gaze. A fire burned in his eyes. They have to be here. They have to. I know they're here. I saw them in his pocket. They're here. His fist shook, his knuckles tight. Where are they? Where are Jedediah and Octavius? Tell me! Akhmun-Ra was shouting now. Why would they hide from me? I'm their friend. I am the king of Egypt. I am a God-given form. Why would they hide from me after leaving me for 3 years? Tell me! Akhmun-Ra's face was strewn with tears, his mouth forced into a trembling smile, his brow furrowed in concern and confusion. He didn't dare blink.
They're here. Why are they being cruel to me, Nick?
Nick didn't say anything to him. He couldn't say anything to him. All he could do was look at the pharaoh. Akmenra grabbed the new guard by the shoulders.
Where are they, Nick? They're hiding. I know it. Please.
His fingers shook on Nick's shoulders.
Please.
Nick carefully brought the remains out of his pocket. Akmenra's hand slipped from Nick's shoulders, coming together as if he were to drink water from his cupped palms. Nick placed the mangled mass of plastic in Akmenra's grasp.
I'm sorry, Ak.
Silence, for a moment. Akmenra stared at the one eye in the center of the liquefied silicon. His smile broke. Nick tried to help as the pharaoh's legs gave out. Akmenra fell to his knees, looming over the remains. His hands shook in time with his breathing. His tears fell on top of the mass. His cry of anguish echoed through the empty halls, alerting the other exhibits of the truth. Akmenra remained on the floor for a time, Nick holding him in embrace, screaming and sobbing over the deaths of his friends. His stomach ached as he sobbed, breathing strained and painful. He regretted his comments he'd made about them roasting alive. The repressed memories came back to him all at once, the static of memories fading away to reveal the raw, bleeding truth. He didn't see Dexter hand Larry an injured pair of miniatures. He had handed him this corpse. Akmenra felt that the eye was judging him. The memory of a song.
There we go.
Jedediah finished writing the information he'd found about a flower in a small journal. Psychopomp had given him a camping kit that Octavius had likened to a soldier's sarkina, due to the sheer amount of stuff in it. He'd set up a tent, a seating area, and a small fire, over which he'd been roasting some fish he'd caught in the river with a pole. The kit also had a bedroll, a compass, and his favorite thus far, a journal with a pen. Jedediah genuinely couldn't remember the last time he'd held a pen and was able to write. He was sure that Jedediah Strong-Smith had, during his life, but being a miniature, he most likely never did. Jed had a thirst for adventure and a deep love for looking at nature. His paradise lived up to the name. Endless wilderness to explore and document. A few pages of his journal had already been filled with his studies, one of a fish, the other of the mountain range in the distance. Jedediah swore he'd climb it one day. His focus remained on the flower, for now. The bloom was unlike any flower he'd ever seen on Earth, in either life. It was a deep red orchid with a golden center. Its stamens hung heavily, golden and glittering with pollen. It almost shimmered like metal in the sunlight. Maybe I'll grow some of these in a garden if I find more, he thought as he held the blossom by the stem. Carefully, he severed the stem with a hearty snap. Carefully, he gave the plant a few whacks to get rid of the pollen. As he pressed the orchid into the pages of his journal, he heard something. Something he'd never thought he'd hear again. What in the... Was that... Sarah?
¿Por qué no puedo moverme? And Javier? How would I get out of the museum?
No.
Wojanali?
No.
Jedediah!
The residents, the miners, the workers at the railroad. They were in his head. Their voices kept getting louder. Hundreds of people, all speaking at once, directly in Jedediah's brain. His senses began to spiral. His ears rang. His balance teetered. All of them asking where they were, what happened to them, why they couldn't move. All at once. Jedediah thought his mind would collapse.
Stop! Stop! Please!
Jedediah's pleads were in time with painful wounds along his arms, legs, back, and hands. He pulled his hands away from his face to watch as, in each palm, an eye sprouted from the flesh. The organs blinked before focusing on Jedediah's face. The eyes burned as they came into being. Jedediah's agony echoed through paradise.